Remember when Jimmy Garoppolo threw passes to himself at 49ers training camp?
And he caught it. Oh my God.
Well, that bizarre scene might have just been the appetizer for what we're about to see with Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers this year. A lot of people were fooled by fake reports saying that the 49ers would simply cut Aiyuk at the start of the 2026 league year. However, this made no business sense for San Francisco, which again has paid Brandon Aiyuk nearly $7 million per game played since he signed his extension in 2024. The 49ers don't have to do anything with Brandon Aiyuk right now, and in many ways, the ball is still in his court. What if San Francisco forced Brandon Aiyuk to show up at the facility for training camp in order for him to be moved? Here's the mechanism right now, and this is what makes all of this so fascinating, and this is why the ball probably does sit in Brandon Aiyuk's court. The 49ers do not owe him money until he actually shows up. Remember what happened last year? Brandon Aiyuk was put on the left squad list after he abandoned the team building. The left squad list means that a player is not being paid, even though he remains under contractual control. And Aiyuk doesn't reach free agency for several seasons. If Aiyuk does not show up this offseason while still under contract and then does not show up in training camp while still under contract, the 49ers can just sit on their hands unbothered, and they don't have to help out another team by releasing Brandon Aiyuk. The 49ers can also, of course, and they are doing this, wait for a trade offer, and that would allow them to move Brandon Aiyuk while getting something in return. But say that an offer doesn't come. What would happen if Brandon Aiyuk also did not show up at 49ers training camp? Well, the option that would be scheduled to trigger $25 million on September 1st would not be something that the 49ers would have to pay, unless, of course, Brandon Aiyuk did show up. So it probably is in his best interest at some point, if the 49ers don't release him, to show up. And that would create fireworks greater even than the fireworks with Jimmy Garoppolo throwing passes to himself in 2022. Now, the situations are inherently different. Garoppolo was on good terms with the 49ers. He was coming off of a shoulder surgery in the offseason, but San Francisco was trying to pave the way for their number 3 overall pick, Trey Lance, to start in 2022. And they were trying to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, but it was proving very difficult to do so given the fact that he was coming off of shoulder surgery. So the 49ers, while wanting to pave the way for Lance, also still had Garoppolo on the team and under contract, and that's why he found himself working out on a side field. It was mutually agreed between both parties that this would be the best holding pattern until a trade could be consummated. Of course, we all know how that ended. Brock Purdy happened to be on the practice field at the same time as one of the 49ers' backup quarterbacks. So was Nate Sudfeld. But Trey Lance got hurt 2 weeks into the season. Luckily for the 49ers, they did not find a trade partner for Garoppolo. They had reworked his contract, so he was the backup. He became the starter after Lance got hurt. Then Jimmy too got hurt in week 13, and Brock Purdy took over as quarterback. But the whole saga was, I think, a valuable lesson to be learned about how the 49ers front office operates. They weren't just going to give Jimmy Garoppolo up for nothing. A lot of people wanted them to just cut Jimmy Garoppolo in the offseason. Instead, they created some salary cap room so that they could carry his number, which was close to $30 million that year, because they decided that a valuable asset, somebody who could have potential value for somebody else, somebody who could have potential value for them, would not just be jettisoned for no reason. In the case of Brandon Aiyuk, there obviously is animosity between him and the 49ers. It's not a Jimmy Garoppolo situation from 2022 in that regard. But there are similarities in this case because Brandon Aiyuk, at least the last time that we saw him on a football field, pre-contract, I guess we could say, was an effective and good player. 2024, there's an asterisk there. He was doing some stuff separation-wise that was good, but he was dropping a lot of passes and did not look solid at all after signing his contract. But there is potential value in Brandon Aiyuk for another team. Probably not for the 49ers, but for the 49ers, there is no incentive to cut bait sooner than they have to. Again, we talked about this the other day. If the Washington Commanders want to sign Brandon Aiyuk, if they want him in their training camp, because we know that receivers without training camps, that's a setup for a bad situation. The 49ers can demand some sort of compensation in order to make that happen. But as long as they have him under contract, they don't have to let that happen. And they certainly do not face an inflection point until Brandon Aiyuk actually shows up and forces that $25 million option, which is scheduled to trigger on September 1st, to become a potential reality. So again, ball in Brandon Aiyuk's court. Fireworks could be coming this training camp. Hold your breath, because the 49ers have business incentive to hold on to an asset for the time being. I don't think that we've ever seen anything quite like this before. I invoke the Jimmy Garoppolo example because that was a player who was technically on the roster but not practicing with the team, and that was weird. This Aiyuk situation can go a number of different ways. I suppose there's a parallel universe in which he'll actually show up and practice and look good, and maybe the 49ers would have to think about keeping him. I know that Brad Graham over at the SF Niners, he runs a really good account taking a look at some 49er strategy. He has theorized that, well, because they held on to Garoppolo for as long as they could, and he ended up staying and contributing positively to the team, maybe they can with Brandon Aiyuk. It seems that that ship has probably sailed with Brandon Aiyuk, but in this league, you also should say never. Realities can change, realities can evolve, and I think the 49ers, by keeping Aiyuk around, also, and probably primarily, set themselves up to benefit from the possibility and the potential of changing realities around the league. Guys can get hurt over the offseason. Guys can get hurt during training camp. Say that a couple teams suffer some wide receiver injuries over the course of training camp, and all of a sudden they have an acute wide receiver need. Well, the likelihood of them sending a later round pick to the 49ers for Brandon Aiyuk grows. Now, of course, he in effect has a no trade clause in his contract, because I think that almost everyone would agree that Brandon Aiyuk is not worth the $25 million option bonus that would have to be picked up by whomever has him on September 1st if he is active and reported to the building. He hadn't played since 2024. The theatrics since then, since the ACL tear and the other damage that he did to his knee in week 7, have definitely lowered his stock, and he would have to agree to rework his deal, take a pay cut with any team that would acquire him in a trade. That's why everybody talks about the Washington Commanders and potentially having to cut in line to acquire Brandon Aiyuk by trading with the 49ers, because he actually would be willing to amend his contract for the Commanders. And if there's no cost to holding it, as is the case right now for the next few months with Brandon Aiyuk, at least the next few months, if he doesn't show up, then the 49ers should continue to hold it. That's what they did with Jimmy Garoppolo. It ended up paying off, and who knows which way this Brandon Aiyuk saga will turn, but it makes a whole lot of business sense. The 49ers have actually also paid a whole lot of money to hold on to him for now. Again, $48.1 million for just 7 games played. That gives them the contractual control right now, though, to do what they see fit. And that is hold Brandon Aiyuk for the meantime. And it looks like it might be up to Aiyuk himself to break the impasse and get things moving. And that would set up fireworks like we've never seen before at the 49ers facility. Can't wait. There's always drama. There's always business. There's always strategy. And, Mike was thinking about different examples from the past that could be comparable to this one. Le'Veon Bell sat out an entire season when he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers looking for more money. Didn't turn out well for him. If we had to speculate about what happened in the 2025 season, well, then Aiyuk, thinking that he could force his way to play elsewhere other than the 49ers, that might have been the impetus behind him leaving the building even as he was healing up from the knee injury. Because if he had played and played well for the 49ers in 2025, there's a strong chance they would have been able to trade his contract to a team where he didn't want to play. The fact that Aiyuk didn't play in 2025 means that his contract is essentially untradeable unless he agrees to restructure it and take that pay cut. That gives Aiyuk that essential no trade clause. So Aiyuk believed that by not playing for the 49ers and by leaving the facility in 2025, he could dictate his next destination. The 49ers can put their foot down and make that course of action as difficult as possible for Aiyuk. Obviously sending him a message, but also sending the rest of the league a message, and while simultaneously protecting their own business interests. You could see the thought process or the potential thought process as we're speculating about it, and some of the strategy here from Aiyuk's side, if we're trying to make reason out of what has been a relatively unreasonable situation. I mean, letting $27 million of guarantees void is crazy. I don't think we've ever seen anything like that, but we can definitely see how the 49ers are incentivized right now to make the absolute most of this situation and not give up contractual control that they paid a lot of money for. Speaking of contractual control, the 49ers brought in several outside additions over the course of this free agency phase 1 and phase 2 period. A total of 7 new players from the outside. And from Osa Odigizua to Mike Evans to Nate Hobbs to Christian Kirk to Brett Toth to Vidarian Lowe to Corliss Waitman, those players totaled $33.3 million in cumulative 2026 cap hit. For comparison, Max Crosby of the Raiders is registering a $35.9 million cap hit this season. So the 49ers got all their outside talent in, including a number of starters. Osa Odigizua and Mike Evans are definitely important starters. They got all of their players in at cap hits that combined to be less than what Max Crosby is scheduled to play for in Las Vegas this season. Financial efficiency for the 49ers. They didn't give out a single bloated deal this free agency, which is really impressive considering that it typically takes overpaying to compete in free agency. But they really scrounged for value. We have all the cap hits now of the signings that the 49ers have made so far. Christian Kirk's deal, initially reported at up to $6 million per year. Yeah, it is up to $6 million, but it's actually only $3 million of base value and a salary cap hit of only $2.96 million. You all know that the deal that the 49ers got on Mike Evans was crazy. $4.25 million on the 2026 salary cap hit, $14.3 million fully guaranteed. Much, much less money he took from the 49ers than was offered by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he obviously wanted to play with Brock Purdy and under Kyle Shanahan. Other contracts that have come in, Corliss Waitman, the new punter, a $1.15 million salary cap hit. Despite the fact that he's going to be paid more than that, they use the thing called the veteran salary exception. They're able to keep his cap hit down at the veteran league minimum for a player of his service time, but his base salary a little bit higher than that, plus $400,000 fully guaranteed for Corliss Waitman. So the 49ers contract guys doing a lot of very efficient work. And now I have it all tallied for San Francisco. $16.7 million of 2026 salary cap space left on my 53-man projections. That number is going to be a little bit lower than other spots, but the reason for that is I've already essentially counted the draft class in my totals because I have placeholders in my 53-man roster projection. The 49ers have that $16.7 million, and I've also counted the practice squad. I do think they need to bump that number well up over $20 million for carryover into 2027 when costs escalate. But the really good news there is that they've got $16.7 million, even though Trent Williams' salary cap hit is now temporarily $46.3 million because the 49ers allowed his option bonus to count as base salary instead. They didn't pick up the $10 million option. It inflated Williams' number temporarily to $46.3 million. They can still lower it down to about $24, $25 million and save, $22 million of salary cap space. So you Add 22 on top of 17 million, and the 49ers all of a sudden would be looking at nearly 40 million in salary cap space. Enough to still sign Joey Bosa, maybe Joel Bitonio, although I think maybe the 49ers will do some drafting along the offensive line. They still have plenty of roster spots left to be filled. There are still 18 roster spots that the 49ers must take care of this offseason. Brandon Aiyuk might take one of those, so that would be the downside of carrying Brandon Aiyuk for a while, but one spot out of 90, I think it's worth it for the 49ers to continue to hold him in the building. 6 draft picks currently scheduled for the 49ers, so they are in a financially good position to move forward. It has been a fascinating free agency period so far, and you know what? It's going to be a crazy year. I think that we can remember Garoppolo in 2022. That was bizarre. Well, just wait to see what happens with Brandon Aiyuk here in 2026.
Oh, it's a floater. And he caught it. Oh my God.